Good afternoon. Today we are talking about crucial conflict-free communication. How can you develop and have crucial conflict-free communication in all your relationships in your life? I find that there are many people who go throughout life not being able to voice or say exactly what they're thinking. They're not able to share a great idea in the workplace or what's impacting them in their personal relationships because there's not the skill set of how to have these crucial conflict free conversations. So, this week we've been doing a series leading up to my class that launches next week called The Fundamentals to Reclaim Your Life. And the fundamentals are extreme self care, how to have great boundaries, crucial conflict free conversations, and then how to unhook from over helping and approach life as a victor instead of a victim. So, crucial conflict free conversations actually comes that this builds on each other. So, hi Laura, thanks for being here and being present. So, in order to have crucial conflict free conversations, there's some things that need to be in place. One, this extreme self care piece where you're taking care of yourself and you know exactly, you have the confidence of what you need for yourself, what the other people around you need for themselves, and you're standing in this self-aware place of taking care of you. And then what we talked about yesterday is boundaries. And boundaries really help us to clarify what we are willing to tolerate in our life and what we're not, or what we need to have in the workplace in place, not, and what we will tolerate in relationships or not. So, crucial conflict-free communication is going to be much easier for you when you have these pieces in place. Okay. So, being able to communicate anything that you need to communicate in a way that's respectful to the people around you is a skill. And almost any team that you're at in the workplace, any business you're at, any relationship, and you ask people what's the most important thing that makes this work, one of the things they'll always tell you is communication. But yet, we have not had any extensive training on how to effectively communicate. So, it's time that we learn these tools so that we can live what I call an unsilenced life. There's so many times, even as children, that we've been told, be seen and not heard. We've had opportunities to speak up where, we've been shamed or blamed or made wrong for sharing our voices. Many times as women, we're told that we're not, we grew up in many religious settings where it wasn't appropriate for a woman to speak in public or to lead a congregation. And so there's these many messages that we've had about when it's okay to speak up and not okay to speak up. And so becoming unsilenced in your communication is all about connecting with that true heart space inside of you and being able to communicate from that space with ripping off all of these filters and these masks that keep us silent. So that's where we have to start in crucial conflict-free communication. Then we have to stand in a space of understanding that I am not you, you are not me. So everybody who's involved in the communication sees things from their own perspective, and we have to honor that and respect that. And then we have to think through to start with, what is the mutual purpose of the conversation? Now, when I'm going into a conversation, I have to step back and think about that. What do I want for me from this conversation? What do I want from the other person from this conversation? And when I can keep that and honor that highest mutual purpose for both people, then it gives a new perspective to step into the conversation. And what we're going to talk about one aspect of crucial free communication today, crucial conflict free communication today. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of an example of how you can pull this all together. So for conflict free communication to take place, there has to be an element of safety. When it's safe, you can say anything. And safety means that it comes more out of, derives from a sense of what's happening inside of you and knowing how to honor what's happening with the other person. Now, obviously, if there's any threat of physical violence or safety on the extreme side, then that is a very big red flag to say, okay, something obviously needs to shift in this relationship. You know, in the workplace, even there was one day that I had to have a really difficult conversation with someone. And I was aware that this person could be triggered and might become violent. And so when I went to set up that communication, I took the extra precaution to have another supervisor, another person there with me as a layer of safety. And the gentleman got right in my face and he was very, very angry. And I was not fearful because I knew I had taken the precautions I needed to take. And he backed down and I was able to say what I needed to say. Now, I don't know if it was necessarily conflict free, but it was conflict free on my side. It wasn't conflict free on his side. So anyway, that was just a little detour in our conversation. So about how to look at safety. So setting up safety in communication. When it's safe, you can say anything, and gifted communicators keep an eye on safety and they know how to make it safe for them and how to make it safe for the other person to communicate. Okay. But don't let safety problems keep you from saying the thing that you need to say. It's just something that you need to be aware of and you need to know how to deal with that. So here are the couple ways that we can determine when safety is an issue. When the communication goes into silence or violence. And I want you to think about this because it's easy for us to think about violence as being the red flag, but silence is also an equal red flag. So with silence and violence, they're both signals that something is not safe in the conversation. So what are the ways that silence shows up? One is masking, understating what your true opinion is. Sarcasm, sugarcoating, buffering. Those are all ways where we don't show up and express completely what we're saying. It's this walking on eggshells piece where we're just tentatively saying, feeling, checking the water for what we need to say. Avoiding is another way. So avoiding involves steering completely away from sensitive subjects or not we know we need to have this conversation, but it never happens. The other person, every time the conversation is scheduled, they cancel. No, I can't have it tonight because I'm too tired. I have a headache or whatever. And that continues to be avoided. That is a silence an avoidance strategy on silence. And then withdrawing means pulling out of a conversation altogether. Sometimes this can also look like steering you off down a rabbit trail. So if you're in the middle of a conversation and someone, they bring up a subject or they blame you for something, but it's your fault that you did that. That can be a way of redirecting and avoiding and withdrawing from the true topic at hand. Okay, and then let's continue to, sorry, my notes are giving me a fit here. And I see some comments there, so I'll address them in the end. Violence is about, is verbal strategy that attempts to convince, control, or compel you to someone else's point of view. So anytime someone is trying to convince you to their point of view, that is considered verbal violence. So controlling, coercing you to their way of thinking, cutting you off mid-sentence, not allowing you to state your thought, shaming you for your thought, changing the subject, any piece of that is that. And then labeling. Labeling is a way of putting a label on people or ideas so we can dismiss them under a general stereotype or category. It's also that labeling, if you've been around in my community for a while, I don't encourage labeling of any kind, of someone saying I was abused, or this person is a narcissist, or using language like that, because I do feel like that using labels does diminish, it excuses their behavior, when that behavior is almost always a protection and defense mechanism for hurt inside. Now, that doesn't excuse that behavior, and it doesn't make it okay for them to have that behavior. And then there are cases where we know there are extreme, like narcissistic personality disorders and things like that are very real. And there are people who have a lot of narcissistic behaviors. It always stems back to that hurt inside of them that they're trying to defend and overcompensate for, just like the person who's experiencing or receiving that allows themselves to stay and receive it longer than necessary because of the hurts inside of them. So, and then the last part of violence is attacking. You've moved from, so when you're going to attacking, it's like name calling. Well, you're stupid. You're not smart. If you were smart, and it's going into that type of a thing is considered violence in communication. Doesn't have to be physical violence. We're talking about verbal violence, and the conversation no longer becomes safe. So in the fundamentals class, we're going to be diving deeper into these things and then learning the strategies that actually show us how to communicate more effectively. Now I'm going to go back and see if I can find Laura's comment here. What if in the past the people got aggressive and violent? I had to stop all communication with one person. I did it in a civil manner, but I won't be able to open that door with them again. Tools for this are always useful. Absolutely. So I agree, Laura, there are people in your life that if they cannot rise to the occasion to communicate respectfully, that is where we go back to yesterday's lesson on boundary setting. So it really comes to this idea about what type of people do you want in your world? And do we want people who make it unsafe for us to communicate? Do we want people who, are going to be physically violent when we have to have a difficult conversation? I don't think that's probably what anybody wants in their life. And so crucial conflict-free communication allows you to go through a process of drawing a new boundary that says, going forward, this is the way that I will communicate with you. And then if that person can't abide by that, honor that, they're too engrossed in the enmeshed in their own hurts and their own issues, then there are definitely times when we need to step out and step away from relationships. This is where codependency comes in, and that is the next piece in the fundamentals class, the unhook from overhelping, when we really get trapped in some of these relationships because we get drawn back in over and over again to an unhealthy situation. And it is about drawing a boundary. And Laura says, makes sense. I kept boundaries of no contact. Yes, absolutely. That's absolutely what you need to do, because ultimately, to have crucial conflict-free communication, there's much of that if you are conscious and leading that conversation, there's a lot that you can do without the other person being consciously part of that. So if you're leading a conversation and you're doing that consciously, you can make a lot of progress in many, many difficult conversations. Yet there are times when if the other person just is not willing to rise to the occasion, or the behavior in that conversation is unhealthy, then it is time to disconnect. In my own life, I've had to do that. I grew up in an extreme conservative religious group that was very cultic, and very, very damaging and controlling. And when my family left that group, we have had no contact with any of our family members there for over 30 years. Now, part of that was their choice to shun us as their practice, but also part of it was we needed to disconnect from them because of the extreme unhealthy behavior on their side. But the more you understand what you will and won't tolerate in your life, and then you can use these conversations to help lead the way, it clarifies these situations. And we can take the feeling like we're on an emotional roller coaster out of we can level that roller coaster out. So yeah, there's so many examples of how we can do this. But when I invite new people into my world, let's use the dating arena as an example, because it's easy for me to pick on. I'm a single woman in the dating arena, and after I was divorced, I engaged in a lot of unhealthy conversations with men in the dating arena where I just probably knew like it wasn't going anywhere, but yet, I carried those conversations on, or I had conversations about topics that I didn't want to have conversations about. But I didn't know how to just firmly draw that line and say, you know what, this just isn't healthy for me. And because I was afraid of maybe I'll not be able to find someone who matches my values. Fear. It's always the underlying object is always fear. And so the cool thing is that when you learn this crucial conflict-free communication process and you're very clear on what your boundaries are and what you will and will not accept in your life, then you can apply it in many different situations. So I'm very clear on what I want and expect out of a partner in my life now. And so that is, they're willing to communicate on the phone, they're willing to communicate by a video chat, and then they're, going to get to actually meet in person. And there has to be a balance of communication there, and there has to be interest on both sides. It can't be, one person asking all the questions and one person not. So when I meet someone, they kind of go through this 5-point phase where I might communicate with them via text for a while, and how that goes is going to determine if they get onto the phone call. But someone who immediately wants to take a conversation, into the bedroom right away, or things that are just not appropriate for me until after I've actually met and talked to someone. That, like, anytime a conversation goes that direction in that communication via text setting, that's like, okay, automatic, no, you're not the person I'm looking for. So I can knowing what I will or will not tolerate, I know that. And I can just very easily say, you know what, we're not a fit, and I'm going to move on. So then I can go on to this next phase of communicating with them on the phone. Does that feel good? Is that a good conversation? Great. And then I can continue to move it on. And if any point in time there I see that that their characteristics are not matching up with mine, I can, just kindly let them know that and move on. And it's taken a lot of the frustration out of the dating scene for me, because I know what I'm looking for, and I'm not going to settle for anything less than what I'm looking for. And I think that is the point about communication, is very clearly knowing what it is that you want to accomplish, and then doing that in a manner that's respectful to all people involved. So I hope this conversation has been helpful for you today, and I will look forward to having you either inside the Women Breaking Free community or as part of the fundamentals class that's coming up next week. So thank you all for being here, and have a fantastic rest of your night. I'm Transformational Women's Coach Vicki Haddock, and I'm here to help women live unsilenced, conscious lives by connecting to their own inner guidance system and healing the hurts that hold them back, so that they can live truly fulfilled lives. Have a great evening.